right, let's talk about one of the biggest players in all of human history, Rome. We're going to cover more than 1,000 years, from a wild origin story all the way to a legacy that literally shapes our world today, and we're going to do it fast, so let's dive right in. We've got 5 key stops on this tour. We'll kick things off with that legendary founding story. Then, we'll jump into the Republic and its epic showdown in the Punic Wars. After that, the dramatic shift from Caesar to Augustus, followed by the Golden Age, the Pax Romana. And finally, we'll look at the collapse and the incredible legacy Rome left behind. So first up, the legendary founding. You know, every great civilization needs an epic origin story, and Rome's is definitely one for the books. It's got gods, abandoned babies, and a wolf. Seriously. The legend goes like this. The twin sons of Mars, the god of war, are born. Their names are Romulus and Remus. They're abandoned, left to die in the Tiber River. But get this, they're rescued by a she-wolf who nurses them. Eventually, a shepherd finds them and raises them as his own. When they grow up and learn the truth, they decide to build a city. But they argue, things get heated, and in a shocking twist, Romulus kills Remus and founds the city in 753 BC, naming it, of course, after himself, Rome. So, after Romulus, Rome is ruled by a line of 6 more kings. But by 509 BC, the Roman people had had enough of kings. They kicked out the last one and started something totally new, something revolutionary. They created a republic. And this new republic? It was ready to stretch its legs and show the world what it was made of. This next era is all about massive expansion, brutal wars, and an epic struggle for control of the Mediterranean against Rome's #1 rival. So what even is a republic? Well, the whole idea was to make sure no single person could ever have total power. Again, you had elected officials, and power was split between the wealthy, aristocratic Senate, the patricians, and the assemblies for the common folk, the plebeians. It was a system built on tension, but it worked. As the Republic grew, it was on a direct collision course with the other superpower of the time, Carthage. And what's so fascinating is how completely different they were. Rome's strength was its insanely disciplined army of citizen soldiers, its legions on land. Carthage, on the other hand, was a trading empire. Their power came from a massive navy and armies of paid mercenaries. It was the ultimate clash, land power versus sea power. But hold on a second. This all happened over 2,000 years ago. How in the world do we know so much about these epic wars and the strategies they used? It's a really good question. Well, the answer comes down to the ancient historians who wrote it all down. But they didn't all have the same goal. On one hand, you have Polybius, a Greek historian. He was all about being analytical and objective. He wanted to know why things happened and stuck to the verifiable facts. Then you have Livy, a Roman. He was more of a patriot. He wanted to tell a great story that would inspire Romans and teach them moral lessons. Reading them both gives us a much richer, more complete picture of what really happened. Now, this timeline shows the biggest moments of the Republic, and smack in the middle, you see the Punic Wars. The absolute most terrifying moment for Rome came in 218 BC. The Carthaginian general Hannibal did the unthinkable. He marched his entire army, including war elephants, over the freezing Alps and down into Italy. He ran wild for years and came this close to completely destroying Rome. Rome survived Hannibal, but the victory brought so much wealth and power that it started to tear the Republic apart from the inside. And this brings us to one of the most famous and bloody transitions in history, the end of the Republic, the birth of the Empire. And it all revolves around one man, Julius Caesar. His rise to power was just relentless. First, he forms a power-sharing deal called the Triumvirate. Then, he goes off and conquers Gaul, modern-day France, which makes him fabulously wealthy and gives him a loyal, battle-hardened army. He uses that army to win a civil war against his main rival, Pompey. And finally, in 45 BC, he gets himself declared dictator for life, which basically meant the Republic was dead. But a lot of people saw this absolute power as the ultimate betrayal. So, on the Ides of March, 44 BC, a group of senators who thought they were saving the Republic cornered Caesar in the Senate and assassinated him. But here's the irony. Instead of restoring freedom, all they did was light the fuse for another massive civil war. Yeah, that whole plan to save the Republic, it failed spectacularly. Caesar's death didn't bring peace. It just kicked off another round of brutal fighting. A new power vacuum opened up, which was filled by a second triumvirate, another trio of powerful men all hungry for the top spot. And from the smoke and rubble of that final civil war, one man emerged as the undisputed winner: Caesar's young adopted heir, Octavian. After he defeated his last rival, Mark Antony, the Senate gave him a new title: Augustus. That moment in 27 BC is what we mark as the official start of the Roman Empire, and Augustus was its very first emperor.
And what a start it was. Augustus brought an end to a century of civil war and kicked off an era of incredible peace and prosperity, known as the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. This, right here, was Rome's golden age. How long did this golden age last? About 200 years. Let that sink in. For 2 full centuries, the massive, sprawling Roman world was mostly at peace. That's a pretty incredible achievement. And during this time, the empire was absolutely booming. It expanded to its largest size ever, with a population hitting 70 million people. The Mediterranean basically became a Roman lake, which meant trade exploded. They built incredible roads, aqueducts, and entire cities. This was Rome at the absolute height of its power and influence. But, as we all know, golden ages don't last forever. No empire does. So for our last chapter, we have to ask, how does a superpower like this finally crumble? And just as important, what did it leave behind?
Well, first things first, the fall wasn't a single event. It didn't happen on a Tuesday. It was a long, slow, complicated decline. You can see it on this timeline with a key moment in 284 AD when they split the empire in two just to make it manageable, and then the date most historians use for the final collapse in the West, 476 AD. So why did it fall? There's no single easy answer. It was a perfect storm. You had massive economic problems inside the empire, constant political instability and corruption, and the crushing cost of defending borders that were just too big. Then you had the external pressure, constant invasions by tribes the Romans called barbarians. And this is where the European Huns entered the story. Their push into Europe created a huge domino effect, what we call the migration period, which sent waves of other peoples crashing against Rome's frontiers. But the story doesn't end there, not by a long shot. Rome's legacy is all around us. The very foundations of our modern legal systems, they come from Roman law. The arches and domes in our buildings, the use of concrete, Roman. Languages like Italian, French, and Spanish, they're literally called Romance languages because they come from the Roman language, Latin. And our fundamental ideas about what a republic is, or a senate, or citizenship, that's all Rome. Which leads to one last big question. Did Rome really fall? Or does it, in a way, live on through its incredible legacy in our laws, our language, our buildings, and our ideas? It really makes you think. Hey, if you enjoyed this whirlwind tour through Roman history, do us a huge favor and subscribe, give this explainer a like, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. Sharing the channel really helps us reach more people. Thanks so much for watching.